Hey guys, Level Cap here, and DICE have just released Battlefield 5's final content update. In total, the update adds 2 new maps, Marj Encampment, and a reworked large-scale version of Provence, 9 new weapons, 6 new vehicles, 5 new gadgets, and 3 types of grenades. In addition to the new maps, weapons, and vehicles, there are also 14 new US faction soldiers and 2 new Japanese faction soldiers. Panzerstorm and Twisted Steel have both been updated to feature the Germans versus the US instead of the British faction. Al Sudan will also be updated later this month with the same change, but has been removed from rotation pending a hotfix to iron out a bug. Notably absent from the patch notes is mention of any sorts of performance improvements or expansion of the game's community server system. As far as I know, there's still a pretty major update in the works for the community game server that should add on a ton of requested features. Both of the new maps are 64-player and support Conquest, Breakthrough, TDM, and Squad Conquest. Marj Encampment is set in the North African country of Libya. In Breakthrough, the final sector changes to Conquest Assault to mix things up a bit. We've known about Marj for some time now, as it's been both data mined and it was featured in the blog post announcing Battlefield 5 wouldn't be getting new content after this summer. As for how it plays, I'd say it's par for the course in terms of linear urban maps, lots of buildings for people to maneuver through, lots of campers, lots of choke point firefights. I think it's a good blend of the close quarters action that Battlefield 5 has pushed in other maps like Devastation or Operation Underground. It feels really focused and well crafted, especially with some of the interior areas. Calling the second map new is a little bit of a stretch. It's a reworked version of Provence that adds 64 player modes and supports tanks. Previously, Provence and Lofoten Islands were added to the game as leftovers from the scrapped 5v5 game mode. Many players, myself included, were disappointed to see the maps added without any large mode support. At launch, they only featured Squad Conquest and TDM. At the end of the day, Battlefield is a franchise about large-scale conflict, so many players felt pretty underwhelmed by 2 small-scale maps. But this reworked version of Provence is honestly a night and day difference from the original version. Not only does it feel like a proper Battlefield map, but it plays like one. It reminds me a lot of Battlefield 1 maps such as St. Quentin Scar and Suez Canal. There's wide open spaces for vehicles to fight in, and the urban area is probably one of the better areas of its kind in Battlefield 5. Of all the maps that have been added to the game, I think Provence is one of the best World War II feeling maps. It's definitely up there with the Pacific content when it comes to a strong sense of location and history. Several other maps have also received some tweaks. Al Sudan, Panzerstorm, and Twisted Steel have all had their factions swapped to US versus Germany. Unfortunately, an issue with the incorrect VO playing on Al Sudan has delayed its rollout. The map will be unavailable in matchmaking until a hotfix is deployed that clears the bug up. However, the British and Germans will still be featured in grand operations on all 3 maps. On Panzerstorm, the Germans are now the defenders. Outpost on Twisted Steel has been tweaked to fix some floating props near the radio tower A, and a player stuck spot near tower D has also been fixed. Aerodrome had a machine gun turret that was accidentally placed below ground removed. Merida had a ground hole patched up. An issue that could disable smoke effects in Operation Underground has been fixed. Combined Arms, the game's co-op player mode, had a missing end of round screen tab fixed. Firestorm also got a tweak that makes it so players no longer enter a bleed out state when playing solo mode. Finally, the practice range has gotten the Panzerbuchse 39 and the Boys AT rifle bipods added. The 9 new weapons have all either been teased or data mined in the past, so some of them might sound familiar. The Shogun shotgun is being added to the support class. Battlefield 1 players will be happy to hear the infamous Shosha is finally coming to Battlefield 5. The LMG has been playable in the game's campaign but hadn't been added to multiplayer until now. It's a highly requested weapon. The M3 infrared is being added to the Recon class. This was actually one of the first ever infrared night vision weapons utilized in a war. It's also based on the M2 carbine and saw limited action during World War II. During the Korean War, it was actually reworked as the M3, featuring a much better effective range. Both variants are notable for the gigantic infrared spotlight mounted above the weapon's scope and heavy battery pack. The Recon class is also getting the Swiss K31/43 bolt-action rifle. The Medic class is getting a pretty unique British submachine gun prototype called the Well Gun. It was intended to replace the Sten as a cheap weapon that could be given to resistant fighters throughout Europe. The Sten was already an incredibly cheap weapon to manufacture, but that was due mainly to its simple design and large tolerances. Because of this, they were known to be unreliable or even dangerous due to accidental misfires, non-functioning parts, or even broken parts that would cause it to explode when fired. The Well Gun was in development in 1943 but didn't make it to service. The Sten Mark IV was chosen over for mass production in a large trial phase. The Assault class is getting an American M1941 Johnson rifle. It was developed before World War II but didn't see much service due to its finicky design. Finally, all classes will be getting the PPK suppressed, M1911 suppressed, and the Well-Rod pistols. When it comes to gadgets, there's actually some pretty exciting new toys to play with. First up, the Recon class gets the, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Doppelschuss double barrel flare gun. It shoots sticky flares that spot enemies within its radius for a short period of time. The Recon class also gets the RMN 50 grenade launcher. This was data mined way back in September of last year and features a selectable cook timer that lets you adjust how long the grenade travels before exploding. When it was data mined, the max range was 100 meters. The Assault class is getting the pistol flamethrower, which just sounds like a hot meme if I've ever heard one. The Shape Charge is a high-impact, small radius mine that sticks to vehicles and does massive damage. As for the Kampf pistol, it was a German spotting gun, but in-game it functions as a grenade launcher. Finally, all classes are getting 3 new grenades, the Firecracker, Demolition, and Type 99 Mine. Unfortunately, there was a pretty major bug preventing many players from getting these weapons. I was one of those players. They've since fixed that bug, and I will be doing a proper breakdown of all the new guns and highlights of the best ones in the near future. In the limited time that I've had to play with them, all of the guns are pretty strong and enjoyable, but nothing that's going to dramatically change the game balance, which overall is a safe bet and a good play on DICE's part. When it comes to vehicles, the US faction gets 4 new planes and an armored car. The planes are the A-20 Bomber, the P-70 Night Fighter, the P-51D Fighter, and the P-51K Fighter. The armored car is the M8 Greyhound, which was the only vehicle of its kind utilized by the US military during World War II. It was a pretty lightweight anti-tank vehicle that was redesigned as a recon vehicle later in the war. The German faction is also getting a new armored car, the Puma. As for any major bug fixes or gameplay tweaks, there really isn't much to talk about. Getting stuck in the bleed-out state should be less common, though it's not a major issue these days. The smoke screen on tanks and planes should now correctly block spots and name tags. Smoke grenades should now detonate in the exact same positions for all players. An issue with the lunge mine has been fixed so players don't get pushed back a second time when switching to it. Overall, I'd say if this were any other content update for Battlefield 5, it would be celebrated by the community. The new maps are both really strong and have a great World War II vibe to them, and all of the new weapons and gadgets are really the highlight of this update for me because they're very interesting and fun to play with. The update is extremely solid when compared to other Battlefield 5 updates, which are notorious for being extremely buggy and lacking content. If I was going to compare this update to, say, one of Battlefield 4's average updates, it would definitely be underwhelming by comparison. Now, of course, it's almost impossible to view this update as just an update on its own. It's not any old Battlefield 5 update. It's the last content, effectively, that we're getting for this game, ever. This leaves the game in a state that I would say is largely incomplete in terms of what you would expect from a Battlefield game covering a certain war period. I mean, look at the very first Battlefield game, Battlefield 1942. We got almost every single major iconic battle in that game. Eastern Front, Pacific, Germans and Americans fighting, Italians fighting, British fighting. You had all the major factions in there and major battles from every era of the war. And then this game just gives us a small sliver of that, most of which we got towards the tail end of the game with the Pacific. So is this patch decent? Yes. Does it leave Battlefield 5 in a state that is going to make those players who wanted more from the game happy? Absolutely not. Is it going to instill confidence in me or the rest of the player base? that the next Battlefield game is going to be good and correct all the mistakes that DICE made in this one. It certainly doesn't give me confidence in that. As for the rest of the player base, that's something we'll just have to wait and see what happens over time. As always guys, thanks for watching. Check out the patch for yourself, especially if you're still dabbling in Battlefield 5 these days. And I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.